Chapter 1. The Witness. Rain fell like shattered glass over the city, carving rivers in the grime of forgotten alleys. Neon signs bled crimson and electric blue across wet pavement, their reflections fracturing in oily puddles. Alara Voss pulled her threadbare coat tighter, the damp chill seeping into her bones. Stupid, she cursed herself. Stupid to forget her umbrella. Stupid to take the shortcut behind the obsidian. But the night's final set had left her fingers numb and her mind hollow, and all she'd wanted was the sanctuary of her cramped apartment, the scent of dust and old wood, the silence broken only by the hesitant notes of her piano. The alley yawned like a wound. Music from the club pulsed through the walls, a distant heartbeat drowned by the rain's rhythmic thrum and the wail of a siren slicing through the night. Alara clutched her bag, its leather worn soft by years of carrying sheet music, dreams pressed between pages. Inside, Chopin's Nocturne sat beside a half-eaten protein bar. Survival and soul crammed together. Then, crack, a sound too sharp, too final. Alara froze, breath trapped in her throat, cold as ice. At the alley's mouth, backlit by the sputtering glare of a dying street lamp, 3 shadows moved. 2 men in black held a third between them, his body limp, head lolling. The third figure stood apart, taller, broader, an aura of coiled violence radiating from him. He raised a hand. Moonlight glinted off cold metal. "Don't look." The warning screamed in her mind, "Run." But her fingers moved on their own, sliding her phone from her pocket. The camera clicked open, zoomed in. Just as he pulled the trigger, the gunshot was a muffled pop, swallowed by the rain. The man in the middle jerked, then crumpled. His body hit the pavement with a wet, sickening thud. Alara's hand trembled. The phone nearly slipped from her grasp. She was still recording, still watching. The shooter turned. Light carved his face from the shadows, high cheekbones, a blade-straight nose, lips curved in a pitiless line. Valentine Hart. The name was a poison in her veins. Everyone knew the Harts. They owned the city's glittering towers and its festering underbelly. Valentine, the heir, was a ghost story told in whispers. He smiles when he breaks you. Her thumb stabbed the stop button. Too late. One of the men beside Valentine snapped his head toward her hiding spot. Eyes like chips of obsidian scanned the darkness. Alara ran. Her bag slammed against her ribs as she bolted. Rain stung her face. Footsteps pounded behind her. Real or imagined, she didn't know, didn't care. She wove through a labyrinth of dumpsters and discarded furniture, her boots skidding on slick concrete. A chain-link fence loomed. She scrambled over. Metal biting into her palms, her coat snagging, tearing. She tumbled down the other side, landing hard on one knee. Pain flared, sharp and bright. Move, move. She lurched up, limping into a narrower alley. The stench of rotting food and wet brick choked her. Something growled. A feral dog, ribs visible beneath mangy fur, blocking her path. Its lips peeled back from yellowed teeth. Alara grabbed a shattered bottle, brandishing the jagged edge. "Back off!" Her voice was raw, unfamiliar. The dog hesitated. Behind her, a shout echoed, "This way!" She hurled the bottle. It shattered near the dog's paws. The animal yelped, darting into shadows. Alara ran, every breath a knife in her lungs. She burst onto a street, headlights blinding her. A car horn blared. She dodged, sprinting past shuttered storefronts, her reflection flashing in dark windows, a ghost with wild eyes. Almost home. Her apartment building hunched like a tired old man, paint peeling, stairs sagging. She fumbled for her keys, hands shaking violently. The key scraped metal, slipped, clattered to the wet steps. She snatched it up, jammed it into the lock, turned. Shoved inside, slammed the door, leaned against it, gasping. Silence, thick, suffocating. Alara slid down to the floor, knees drawn to her chest. Rainwater pooled around her, dripping from her hair, her coat. Her scarf, her mother's scarf, crimson silk, the last thing she'd ever given her, was gone, torn away in the alley. A sob clawed up her throat, but she choked it back. No tears, not now. She pulled out her phone. The video was still there, grainy, shaky, but undeniable. Valentine Hart's face, cold and merciless. The gun, the body, evidence. Her thumb hovered over 911, but the stories flooded back. a journalist who'd exposed heart corruption, found floating in the river, a witness who recanted, face bruised beyond recognition. Valentine's voice in a rare interview, "My family protects this city. We always clean up our messes." She couldn't trust the police, not with this. The rain washed the blood from Valentine Hart's knuckles, pink rivulets swirling down the drain. The body was already gone, vanished into the city's hungry belly. Efficient, clean, boss. Merrick, his head of security, held out a scrap of crimson silk. She dropped this. Valentine took it. The fabric was soft, expensive, out of place in that grimy alley. He brought it to his face, inhaled. Beneath the rain and city rot, a whisper of something else. Vanilla and nervous sweat. Fear. He'd seen her. Just a flash. Wide eyes, pale face. Dark hair whipping as she fled. A mouse who'd stumbled into a viper's nest. "Find her," Valentine ordered, his voice low, lethal. "Before dawn. I want her name, her address, her fucking blood type." Merrick nodded. "And when we find her?" Valentine crushed the silk in his fist. She saw. She recorded. "She's a loose end." He met Merrick's gaze. "But she's mine to cut. Bring her to me, alive." Back to Alara. A knock shattered the silence. 3 heavy, deliberate strikes against her door. Boom, boom, boom. Alara's heart stopped. Slowly, silently, she pushed herself up, peering through the fisheye lens. He filled the hallway. Valentine Hart. Rain glistened in his dark hair, dripped from the shoulders of his tailored black coat. His expression was calm, empty, terrifying. Her deadbolt wouldn't stop him. Nothing would. The knob turned. The lock clicked open. He had a key. Valentine stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. He filled her tiny apartment, his presence sucking the air from the room. His eyes, gray as storm clouds, swept over her meager belongings. The sagging sofa, the dented lamp, the old upright piano dominating one corner. Then his gaze locked onto her. "Alara Voss," he stated, her name a soft caress that felt like a brand. He pulled her crimson scarf from his pocket, holding it out like an offering. Or a trophy. "You run fast. For a pianist." She couldn't speak, couldn't move. He took a step closer. The scent of rain, expensive cologne, and something metallic, blood, washed over her. "You have something that belongs to me." He tossed her phone onto the rickety coffee table. It landed with a thud beside her open sheet music, Chopin's Raindrop Prelude. Her voice was a rasp. "What do you want?" He smiled. It didn't touch his eyes. "The video, and your silence." Or another step. He was close enough now for her to see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes, the faint scar bisecting his left eyebrow. Close enough to feel the heat radiating from him. "Or I ensure you never play another note, never breathe another breath." His gaze flickered to her hands, still trembling at her sides. Such talented fingers. It would be a waste. He reached out, not touching her, but tracing the air near her cheek. A phantom touch that made her flinch. Option 1. Give me the phone. You live. Quietly. Option 2. He let the threat hang, thick and suffocating. Alara's mind raced. Panic threatened to drown her. She looked at the phone, at his impassive face, at the scarf he still held, the last thread connecting her to a life before loneliness. Then, something cold and sharp cut through the fear. Resolve. She lifted her chin, meeting his storm-gray eyes. A faint, defiant smirk touched her lips. "I uploaded it," she whispered. For the first time. Something flickered in Valentine Hart's eyes. Surprise. Then, terrifyingly, a spark of dark, intrigued amusement. The game had just begun. Chapter 2. The Bargain. Rain lashed against the window pane like frantic fingers trying to claw inside. The air in Alara's apartment crackled, thick with the scent of wet wool, Valentine's expensive bergamot cologne, and the sharp tang of her own terror. "I uploaded it." Her lie hung between them, brittle and audacious. Valentine Hart didn't move, didn't blink. The storm-gray eyes fixed on hers narrowed almost imperceptibly. The flicker of dark amusement hardening into something colder, sharper, dangerous. "Clever mouse," he murmured, his voice a low vibration that scraped against her nerves. He took another step, closing the distance until the damp chill radiating from his coat seeped through her thin sweater. His gaze dropped to her trembling hands. "But where?" Your dead parents' cloud storage? The one you haven't accessed in 3 years. Alara's blood turned to ice. How? The question screamed silently in her skull. How did he know about her parents' neglected accounts? How did he know anything about her? The violation was profound, more intimate than a touch. He saw the panic shatter her defiance. A predatory satisfaction touched his lips. Thought so. Before she could react, his hand shot out, not to strike, but to snatch her phone from the table. His fingers moved with practiced efficiency, navigating the screens. He didn't ask for her passcode. He didn't need to. Within seconds, he'd accessed her cloud backups, her gallery, her messages. Nothing, he stated. The word flat, final. He dropped the phone. It clattered onto the worn rug beside Chopin's Raindrop Prelude. A bold bluff, Alara, foolish but bold. He was so close now, she could see the faint stubble shadowing his jaw, the tiny scar near his temple she hadn't noticed before. The crimson scarf, her mother's scarf, dangled loosely from his other hand. You recorded my business. He continued, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. You ran, you lied. You've wasted my time and tested my patience. His free hand lifted, not towards her face, but towards the piano behind her. His fingertips brushed the dusty lid, leaving a streak in the grime. This instrument, it's your life, isn't it? The only thing holding your broken pieces together. Alara flinched. It was true. The piano was her sanctuary, her voice when words failed, the only legacy her fractured childhood had bestowed upon her. Valentine's gaze snapped back to her, pinning her like a specimen. I could snap its spine, reduce it to kindling. His fingers curled into a fist, knuckles white, just like I could snap yours. Terror, cold and absolute, washed over her. She believed him, utterly. He leaned in, his breath warm against her ear, a horrifying contrast to the ice in his words. But I'm feeling generous tonight. You fascinate me, little pianist. That split second you smirked. That spark? He pulled back slightly, studying her face. It's rare, like finding a diamond in a sewer. He held up the crimson scarf. So, here's your bargain. Option 1. You give me the real video file. You vanish from this city, change your name, never play publicly again. You live, but your music dies. Alara's heart seized. To never play, it was a death sentence of the soul. Option 2. You become mine. The words hum in the air, thick and suffocating. As smoke. My property, Valentine clarified, his gray eyes boring into hers, leaving no room for misinterpretation. You exist under my protection. Within my world. You breathe when I permit it. You play. His gaze flickered pointedly to the piano, only when I command it. You answer my questions. You sate my curiosities. His eyes traced the vulnerable line of her throat, a look that felt like a physical caress. In return, your hands remain unbroken, your sanctuary. He nodded towards the piano, remains whole. And you get to keep drawing breath, with the music still inside you. He lifted the scarf higher, letting the cool silk whisper against her cheek. It carried the scent of rain, the alley's decay, and something uniquely, terrifyingly him. This, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, is your collar, Alara, the symbol. Wear it, and you belong to me, body and soul. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the relentless hammering of the rain and the frantic thudding of Alara's heart against her ribs. The radiator clanked like a dying thing. Alara stared at the scarf, a lifeline woven from silk and damnation. Then her eyes flickered past him, landing on the small, framed photograph perched precariously on the piano. Her parents, smiling, frozen in a moment before everything shattered. A different kind of cold, the cold of the river water she imagined swallowing their car, seeped into her bones. The life shed led since, scraping by, playing in smoky clubs, the gnawing loneliness stretched before her, gray and desolate. Valentine offered a different desolation, gilded and suffocating, but a desolation that included the one thing she couldn't live without, the ability to make the piano speak. He saw the wavering in her eyes, the subtle sag of her shoulders. The predator sensing the final surrender, he pressed, his voice losing its silken edge, turning to cold, hard flint. Choose, now, or the choice is made for you. Option 3 involves a return trip to that alley, a convenient dumpster behind the obsidian, and a permanent solution poured in concrete. The threat hung, thick and final. Ilara looked from the scarf, the symbol of her impending captivity, to the photo of her parents, the ghosts of a stolen past. Their smiling faces blurred behind a sudden, hot welling of tears she couldn't suppress. She thought of the crushing silence after the accident, the years of numb survival. Valentine offered a cage, yes, but a cage with music. A cage where she might still feel, even if it was only fear. A sob, raw and ragged, tore from her throat. It wasn't just despair. It was the sound of something breaking deep inside. She couldn't meet his eyes anymore. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, her chin dipped. Not a nod of agreement, but a bow of defeat. A fraction of an inch, a surrender. Valentine didn't smile. There was no triumph in his expression, only a cold, satisfied finality. He simply lifted the crimson silk. With a deliberate, almost ceremonial slowness that felt like a profane ritual, he draped the scarf around her neck. The cool silk settled against her skin like a brand, heavy and inescapable. His fingers lingered for a single, excruciating heartbeat, brushing the delicate skin of her collarbone, sending a jolt of terrified awareness through her. "Wise choice, little bird," he murmured, his voice devoid of any warmth. "Welcome to your gilded cage." He stepped back, his imposing figure seeming to shrink the tiny room further as he surveyed her. The vibrant scarf was a garish splash of color against her pale, terrified face and worn, damp clothes. "Pack one bag," he commanded, his tone brooking no argument. "Essentials only. Marek will be here in 5 minutes to collect you." He turned towards the door, a study in controlled power, then paused, his gaze sweeping dismissively over the old upright piano. "Leave that relic. You'll have a far superior instrument where you're going." He opened the door. The sound of the downpour swelled, a roar of wind and water, then was abruptly cut off as the door clicked shut behind him, leaving Ilara alone in the sudden, suffocating silence. She stood frozen, rooted to the spot. The phantom pressure of his touch burned on her skin. The silk scarf felt like a noose around her neck, soft and deadly. Outside, the distinct crunch of tires on wet gravel cut through the drumming rain. Heavy doors slammed. Her cage, it seemed, had arrived right on time. The sleeves pushed up to his elbows, he looked effortlessly powerful, completely at home in this chilling opulence. His storm-gray eyes swept over her, taking in her damp clothes, her worn bag, the defiant yet terrified set of her shoulders, and finally, lingering on the crimson scarf at her throat. A ghost of that unsettling, predatory satisfaction touched his lips. "Welcome home, little bird," he said. The words devoid of welcome. He took a slow sip from his glass, his gaze never leaving hers. "I trust the accommodations are an improvement." His gesture encompassed the sterile grandeur. Ilara found her voice, though it was thin and strained. "It's large. Efficient," he corrected smoothly. "Everything has its place." He set his glass down on a low table of black stone with a soft clink that echoed. "Including you." He walked towards her, his steps silent on the stone floor. Ilara forced herself not to flinch back, but every muscle tensed. He stopped mere inches away, the scent of bergamot and fine whiskey enveloping her, mixed with that underlying current of something metallic and dangerous. "You have rules now, Ilara," he stated, his voice low but carrying effortlessly in the quiet space. "Pay attention. Your compliance ensures your comfort, your defiance." He let the implication hang, his eyes drifting pointedly to her hands. "Well, you understand the currency." He began to pace a slow circle around her, like a collector appraising a new acquisition. "First, these walls are your world. You do not leave without my explicit permission, escorted by Marek or myself. The doors are biometric. Your fingerprints are not registered. Attempting to bypass them will trigger alarms and consequences you won't enjoy." He paused behind her. Ilara could feel the heat of him, the terrifying proximity. She stared straight ahead, at the dizzying city view, her knuckles white on the duffel strap. "Second, your purpose here is twofold. You play, he said, his voice shifting slightly, becoming almost contemplative. When I wish to hear you, and you answer. When I ask you questions, about yourself, about what you think, about anything that interests me. His fingers brushed lightly against the silk scarf at her nape. She jerked involuntarily. Your honesty is mandatory. Lies are punished. He completed his circle, standing before her again. His gaze was unnervingly direct. Third, your time is mine. You sleep when I allow it. You eat what is provided. You exist according to my schedule. Is that clear? Alara swallowed against the dryness in her throat. The cage, though gilded, felt suffocatingly real. Yes, she whispered. Louder. Yes, she forced out, the words scraping raw. Good. He gestured towards a hallway leading away from the main living area. Your room is down there, the second door on the left. Freshen up. You smell of alleyways and fear. The dismissal was cold, absolute. Alara didn't hesitate. She turned and walked towards the hallway, her legs feeling wooden, the duffel bag suddenly impossibly heavy. The hallway was as starkly luxurious as the main room, lit by recessed lighting. She found the second door. It opened silently to reveal a bedroom that was both beautiful and impersonal. More pale stone, a vast bed draped in charcoal linens, a sleek desk, another floor-to-ceiling window showcasing the stormy night. A closed door likely led to a bathroom. It was a 5-star hotel room devoid of any soul. Her meager belongings looked absurdly out of place. She dropped the duffel bag on the floor, the sound too loud in the silence. Walking to the window, she pressed her palms against the cold glass, staring out at the city, her city, now a distant, unreachable painting. The reflection staring back at her was pale, wide-eyed, a stranger with a crimson noose around her neck. Tears threatened, hot and humiliating, but she blinked them back fiercely. No tears. Not here, not for him. A soft chime sounded, not from the door, but seemingly from the wall itself. Then Valentine's voice, amplified, yet intimate, filled the room from hidden speakers. The piano is in the room adjacent to the main living area. I expect Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, Opus 9, number 2, in 20 minutes. Do not be late. The speakers fell silent. The command hung in the air. Her first performance, not for an audience, but for her captor, on demand, her sanctuary weaponized. Alara closed her eyes, taking a shuddering breath. The music was still inside her. It was the only thing he hadn't taken, yet. She walked to the bathroom, turning on the faucet. The water ran hot, steaming up the pristine mirror. She splashed her face, the heat a small shock against her chilled skin. She looked at the crimson scarf in the reflection. A calling, a brand. 20 minutes. She had 20 minutes to gather the shattered pieces of herself, to lock away the terror, and to play for the devil in his gilded hell. She wouldn't let him break the music. Not yet. Steeling herself, Alara Voss, prisoner, walked towards the door. The cage awaited its songbird. Chapter 4, The Forbidden Key. The lingering vibration of the final chord hung in the air of Valentine's cavernous living room, mingling with the sound of rain against the panoramic windows. Alara kept her hands suspended over the keys of the magnificent Steinway Grand, her knuckles white, her breath shallow. The polished ebony felt cool beneath her trembling fingertips. She had played. She had poured the fear, the defiance, the crushing weight of her captivity into Chopin's melancholic lines. And he had watched. Valentine hadn't moved from the deep armchair positioned like a throne facing the piano. The low light sculpted his face in harsh angles, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched, taut and suffocating, broken only by the storm outside and a frantic drumming of Alara's heart. Slowly, deliberately, he set down his empty crystal tumbler. The soft clink echoed like a gunshot in the stillness. He rose, a predator uncoiling, and walked towards her. Alara forced herself not to shrink back on the piano bench, her spine rigid. He stopped behind her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from him, smell the faint remnants of whiskey and his expensive crisp cologne. His hand lifted. Not to strike, not to grab. His fingers, surprisingly cool, brushed the sensitive skin just below the knot of the crimson scarf at her nape. Elara flinched violently, a gasp escaping her lips before she could clamp it down. "Your fear," Valentine murmured, his voice a low vibration against her ear. "It sharpens the music, like salt on a wound." "Interesting." His touch lingered, tracing the line of the silk collar down to where it met the fragile bones at the base of her throat. It wasn't painful, but it was profoundly violating, a constant reminder of her status, property. "You played the notes," he continued, his fingers still resting lightly against the scarf, "a phantom brand. But you held back. Why?" Elara stared straight ahead at the sheet music, the black notes blurring. "I played what you asked for," she whispered, her voice raw. "Technically," he conceded, his thumb brushing the frantic pulse beating in her neck. She shuddered. "But the rage, Elara, the despair you felt in that alley, in your pathetic apartment. You muted it. Why leash the beast when commanded to roar?" He finally withdrew his hand, stepping around the piano bench to face her. His storm-gray eyes pinned her, dissecting. "Do you think docility will earn mercy? Or are you simply saving your fire, little bird, hoping to scorch me when I least expect it?" A ghost of that chilling amusement touched his lips. "I do enjoy a spark." He didn't wait for an answer, turning towards the hallway. "Your room, now. Sleep. You look exhausted." "Fear is draining, isn't it?" Elara stood on unsteady legs, the command a release and a new kind of humiliation. She fled the oppressive grandeur of the living area, the weight of his scrutiny lifting only slightly as he entered the sterile sanctuary of her assigned room. She closed the door, leaning against it, drawing in ragged breaths, his touch still burned on her skin, the phantom pressure of his fingers against her throat. She tore the crimson scarf off, throwing it onto the pristine bedspread like a poisonous thing. But its absence felt worse. Exposed. Sleep was impossible. The vast, silent apartment pressed in on her. The rain had lessened to a soft patter. An idea, reckless and desperate, sparked. Explore. Knowledge was power, however small. He hadn't explicitly forbidden it, only leaving the penthouse. Moving silently on bare feet, Elara slipped back into the hallway. The main living area was dark now, illuminated only by the city lights bleeding through the windows. She moved past it, down the opposite wing of the penthouse. More doors, all sleek and identical, likely guest rooms or studies. One stood slightly ajar. Pushing it open cautiously, Elara found a room lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes and modern texts. A massive desk of dark, polished wood dominated the center. Valentine's study. It felt colder than the rest of the apartment, devoid of any personal touch, except for a single, framed black-and-white photograph on the desk. She crept closer. It showed a younger Valentine, perhaps in his late teens, standing rigidly beside a severe-looking man with the same storm-gray eyes, his father, Marcus Hart. Behind them, a woman sat in an ornate chair, beautiful but with eyes that held a haunting emptiness. Valentine's mother. There was no affection in the picture, only a chilling formality. Elara remembered his comment about her parents' convenient accident. Did the Harts specialize in convenient tragedies? A glint of metal caught her eye beside the photo frame. A key. Old-fashioned, heavy, made of tarnished silver. It looked utterly out of place in this high-tech fortress. What door in this biometric sealed prison required a physical key? The sound of a door opening down the hall froze her blood. Footsteps, light, purposeful. Valentine. Panic seized her. She couldn't be caught here. Her gaze darted around the study. A large antique globe stood in the corner. She darted behind it, pressing herself into the shadows just as Valentine entered the room. He didn't turn on the overhead light, moving with familiar ease in the dimness. He went straight to the desk. Elara held her breath, peering through the slight gap between the globe and its stand. He picked up the photograph, his expression unreadable in the gloom. His fingers traced the edge of the frame, lingering on the image of the woman with empty eyes. A flicker of something, pain, bitterness, crossed his face, gone so fast she might have imagined it. Then his gaze fell to the spot where the tea had been. He went utterly still. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat threatening to betray her. He knew someone had been here. Slowly, methodically, his eyes scanned the room. They passed over the globe, moved on, then snapped back. He took a silent step towards her hiding place. Ilara squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for discovery, for punishment. The footsteps stopped. She could feel his presence. A cold pressure in the air. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Then he turned. He walked to the bookshelf, pulled out a heavy volume seemingly at random, and placed it on the desk, covering the spot where the key had lain. He didn't look towards the globe again. He simply stood there for a moment, his back to her, a silhouette against the city lights. When he finally left, closing the study door firmly behind him, the silence he left was heavier than before. Ilara slumped against the cold curve of the globe, trembling. He'd known she was there. He'd chosen not to confront her. Why? To prolong the fear? To see what she'd do. And that key. What did it unlock within this gilded cage? It was a secret, a vulnerability hidden behind layers of control, a forbidden key. And the glimpse of the haunted woman in the photo, the fleeting expression on Valentine's face. They were cracks in his icy armor. Tiny, terrifying cracks. As she crept back to her room, the discarded crimson scarf on the bed seemed to mock her. She hadn't found freedom, but she'd found something else. A dangerous question, and a key that might unlock more than just a door. The cage had just become infinitely more complex. Chapter 5. Whispers in the Dust. The silence after Valentine left the study pressed down on Ilara like physical weight. She stayed frozen behind the antique globe, her cheek pressed against its cool, varnished surface, listening to the frantic hammering of her own heart. He'd known. He'd known she was there, hiding like a frightened child. The deliberate way he'd covered the key's absence, the chilling lack of confrontation. It wasn't mercy. It was control refined to an art form. A cat allowing the mouse a momentary illusion of safety before the pounce. The key felt like a live coal in her clenched fist, its tarnished silver biting into her palm. She uncurled her fingers, staring at it in the dim city light filtering through the study window. Heavy, old, utterly incongruous in Valentine Hart's fortress of technology and cold precision. What door in this biometric prison did this open? She couldn't stay. The air in the study felt thick with his lingering presence and the ghosts from that photograph. The severe father, the mother with hollow eyes. Ilara slipped from behind the globe, moving like a shadow back to her sterile room. She shut the door softly, leaning against it, the key clutched tight. She shoved it deep into the pocket of the only pair of jeans she'd packed, the rough denim a small shield against its strange power. Sleep remained impossible. The encounter in the study, the phantom touch of his fingers on her throat while she played, the suffocating weight of the crimson scarf now lying discarded on the cold stone floor, it all churned inside her. The penthouse was a tomb. Silent, watchful. She felt the unseen eyes of cameras, the oppressive awareness that Valentine could be listening, watching from some hidden control room. Explore. The reckless urge returned. Sharper now, fueled by the key. By the glimpse of vulnerability in that photograph, by the desperate need to find something in this cage that wasn't him. He'd said the penthouse was her world. Fine, she would map it. Moving silently, she ventured past her room, down the opposite wing she hadn't explored. More doors. She tried the handles. Locked. All sleek, modern keypads or biometric panels. No place for her old key. A spacious, minimalist kitchen gleamed under recessed lighting, spotless and unused. A home gym filled with intimidating machines stood cold and silent. A media room with plush, cavernous seating felt like a trap. Then, tucked away at the very end of the hallway, almost hidden in an alcove, she found it. A door unlike the others. Not sleek modern metal, but solid dark wood, scarred and old, and in its center, not a keypad or scanner, but a heavy, tarnished silver lock. Her breath hitched. The key in her pocket seemed to pulse with a sudden, cold energy. Glancing furtively down the empty hallway, Ilara pulled the key from her pocket. It felt heavier now, colder. It slid into the lock with surprising ease. A soft, satisfying click echoed in the stillness. She turned the heavy brass knob and pushed. The door opened with a sigh of long disused hinges, releasing a wave of air thick with the scent of dust, old paper, and the faint, melancholic tang of neglect. Ilara stepped inside, closing the door softly behind her. Moonlight, stronger here without the tinted floor-to-ceiling glass, streamed through a single uncovered window, illuminating a scene frozen in time. This wasn't Valentine's sterile luxury. This was something else. A small, cozy room, or it had been once. Faded floral wallpaper peeled at the edges. A plush armchair, upholstery worn thin, sat angled towards a modest upright piano. Not a grand Steinway, but a well-loved domestic instrument, its dark wood scarred and its lid closed. Bookshelves sagged under the weight of novels with cracked spines and sheet music stacked haphazardly. A delicate porcelain teacup sat on a small side table, a thin film of dust coating its inside. Ilara moved further in, her bare feet silent on the worn Persian rug. This felt like a violation deeper than snooping in his study. This felt sacred and forgotten. She approached the piano, running a finger along its dusty surface. A framed photograph sat atop it, partially obscured. She gently wiped the dust away. A young boy, maybe 8 or 9, sat stiffly on the piano bench. His dark hair was neatly combed, his expression solemn, almost wary. Beside him stood a woman. The same haunted woman from the study photo, but younger, softer. Her hand rested gently on the boy's shoulder, and she was smiling down at him. A genuine, warm smile that reached her eyes, transforming her face. The boy wasn't smiling back. His storm-gray eyes, already familiar, held a complexity far beyond his years, a mixture of apprehension and a desperate, aching hope directed solely at the woman, Valentine, and his mother. Ilara's throat tightened. The contrast between this frozen moment of fragile connection and the cold, controlled man who owned her was jarring. What happened? The emptiness in the woman's eyes in the later photo, the chilling formality with his father. A large, leather-bound book lay open on the piano's music stand. Ilara leaned closer. It wasn't printed sheet music, but handwritten. Delicate, flowing script covered the pages, musical notations interspersed with words. A diary? A composition book? The date scrawled at the top of the page was over 20 years old. She carefully turned a brittle page. More music, fragments of melodies. Then, halfway down, a block of text. He forbids it, says it's weak, unbecoming, but the music, it's the only thing that calms the storm inside him. When he plays, just for a moment, he's just my boy. Not the air, not the weapon his father is forging. Today, he played a little phrase he made up. So sad, so beautiful. Like a secret he only tells the keys. I wept. He saw. He stopped. Closed the lid. Said, "Don't cry, Mama. It's just noise." But his eyes were begging me to understand. Marcus must never know. The words blurred before Ilara's eyes. The storm inside him, a secret told only to the keys, begging for understanding. This wasn't just a room. It was a shrine to a broken boy, and the music that was his only solace. Ruthlessly stamped out. By his father, Marcus Hart. The floorboard creaked behind her. Ilara whirled around, the book snapping shut in her hands, her heart leaping into her throat. Valentine stood silhouetted in the doorway. Not angry, not cold, utterly still. His face was in shadow, but the moonlight caught his eyes. They weren't stormy. They were voids, empty, devastated, and fixed on the book in her hands. He didn't speak. He didn't move. The silence in the dusty room was thicker than any threat, heavier than the crimson scarf. He simply stared at her, standing amidst the ruins of his stolen childhood, holding the fragile, handwritten proof of his mother's love and his own suffocated heart. The gilded cage walls didn't feel like steel anymore. They felt like the pages of this forbidden book, fragile and suffocating, closing in on a truth far more dangerous than any video. She hadn't just opened a door, she'd cracked open a tomb. And the ghost staring back at her looked like it wanted to drag her inside. Chapter 6. Requiem for a Ghost. The silence in the forgotten music room wasn't empty. It was a physical thing, thick with decades of dust and the shattered echoes of a boy's stifled music. Valentine stood framed in the doorway, moonlight carving his face into a mask of frozen devastation. His eyes, usually storm-gray and impenetrable, or voids fixed on the leather-bound book in Alara's trembling hands. He didn't rage, he didn't command. He simply existed in that doorway, a monument to a pain so profound it had calcified into the cold control she knew. Alara couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The weight of the book, the intimacy of the words Shed just read. He forbids it. It's the only thing that calms the storm inside him. His eyes were begging me to understand. Felt like sacrilege. Shed trespassed on holy, haunted ground. Slowly, deliberately, Valentine stepped into the room. Dust motes swirled in the moonbeams like agitated spirits. He didn't look at her. His gaze swept over the worn armchair, the modest upright piano, the porcelain teacup, finally landing on the photograph Shed uncovered. The one of him as a boy, his mother's hand warm on his shoulder, her smile radiant, his own eyes holding that fragile, desperate hope. He reached out, his movements unnervingly slow, and picked up the photograph. His thumb traced the edge, lingering on his mother's face, then his own youthful expression. A muscle ticked in his jaw. Her sanctuary, he finally spoke. His voice a low rasp, stripped of its usual silken menace. It sounded raw, broken. Marcus called it her indulgence, her weakness. He looked up, his eyes finally meeting Alara's. The emptiness was gone, replaced by a chilling intensity that burned. He forbade me from coming here after she died. Said it fostered sentimentality. Sentimentality is a liability in our world, Alara. He placed the photograph back with surprising gentleness. He had it sealed. Biometrics changed, forgotten, like her. He turned his gaze fully onto her. The raw pain was being rapidly submerged beneath the familiar, terrifying ice, but traces of it lingered, making his control seem even more brittle. Dangerous. And you, he said, the word sharp as a shard of glass. You picked the lock. You touched her things. You read her words. His eyes dropped to the book she still clutched. You held her soul in your hands. Alaris lynched. I didn't know. I found the key. I was just exploring your cage, he finished, a cold smile touching his lips. Curious about the monster who owns you? He took a step closer. The scent of him, bergamot and winter air, was suddenly laced with the dust of the room, the ghost of old paper. Now you know a piece of it. The broken piece. He stopped before her, looking down at the book. Open it, he commanded, his voice devoid of inflection. Hesitantly, Alara opened the heavy cover. The handwritten script, elegant and flowing, filled the pages. Page 47, Valentine instructed, his voice tight. Her fingers, trembling, found the brittle page. It wasn't diary entries here. It was sheet music, a complex, unfinished composition. The title, scrawled in the same elegant hand at the top, read, Sonata for the Storm Inside, for my Valentine. Alara's breath caught. His mother had written music for him. Music he was forbidden to play, to even hear. Read it, Valentine breathed, his eyes fixed on the notes. Not with your eyes. With your soul, pianist. What do you hear? Alara forced herself to focus, pushing past the terror. She scanned the staves. The opening movement was turbulent, dissonant, crashing chords and frantic arpeggios that mirrored the storm inside his mother had described. But woven through the chaos were moments of aching lyricism, brief, beautiful melodies that soared before being dragged back under by the darkness. It was raw, powerful, profoundly sad. It's, she whispered, her pianist's mind catching the nuances, angry, frightened, but theirs, longing, a desperate search for something beautiful, something calm. She traced a particular phrase with her finger. This melody, it's like a plea, repeated but always interrupted, never resolved. Valentine didn't move. His face was stone, but a flicker in his eyes, a tightening around his mouth, betrayed the impact. She wrote it during the last year, he said, his voice barely audible. When the light was fading from her eyes, when Marcus' grip was tightening, she called it. Her lullaby for the tempest. He reached out, not for the book, but to turn the page himself. His fingers brushed hers, cold, deliberate. Alara froze. Page 48 held only a few more bars, trailing off mid-phrase. Below it, in fainter ink, almost as an afterthought, was a single line of handwritten text, different from the flowing script. The key is in the silence between the notes. My storm. Find the missing chord. Finish our song. It holds the truth. Ilara stared. A hidden message? A musical puzzle left by his dying mother? Valentine's breath hissed out. He snatched the book from her hands, his knuckles white on the worn leather, staring at the unfinished page and the cryptic message. The raw pain surged back, twisting his features. The truth? He rasped, the word laced with a bitterness that could curdle milk. What truth? That Marcus broke her? That he broke me? He slammed the book shut, the sound like a gunshot in the dusty room. Dust bloomed in the moonlight. He whirled on Ilara, the controlled mask completely gone now, replaced by a fury that was terrifying in its rawness. This, he gestured violently around the room. This changes nothing. You are still mine. This room, this book, this ghost, he spat the word, doesn't alter your position. You do not speak of it. You do not think of it outside these walls. Is that understood? Ilara nodded mutely, the weight of his grief and fury pressing down on her. He stepped impossibly close, invading her space. The scent of dust and his cold anger filled her nostrils. He lifted his hand, not to strike, but to grip her chin, forcing her to meet his burning gaze. But you will do something for me, little bird, he hissed. You, with your clever fingers and your soul that hears too much. He released her chin, his finger tapping the cover of the book. You will learn this. You will master this unfinished sonata, and you will play it for me. You will play my mother's requiem. His demand hung in the air, thick with unspoken agony and a terrifying possessiveness. He wasn't just commanding her to play. He was commanding her to channel his dead mother's voice, to resurrect the ghost whose music had been silenced, to become the vessel for a grief so vast it had frozen his own heart. Consider it, Valentine said, his voice regaining some of its chilling composure, though the storm still raged in his eyes. Your first truly meaningful performance in your cage. Fail to capture her essence, fail to find the missing chord she spoke of. He let the thread hang, heavy and implicit, and your music dies with hers, permanently. He turned and walked out, leaving Ilara alone in the moonlit tomb of his mother's sanctuary, the weight of the unfinished sonata, and a grieving tyrant's impossible demand pressing down on her. The gilded cage hadn't just grown more complex. It had become a stage for a haunting, and she was the unwilling medium. The key wasn't just to a room. It was to Valentine's shattered past, and unlocking it might destroy them both. The search for the missing chord had begun, and the stakes were no longer just her freedom, but her soul, and the ghost of a song that refused to die. Chapter 7. The Haunting Melody. The forgotten music room felt colder after Valentine's departure, steeped not just in dust, but in the chilling residue of his shattered composure. Ilara stood frozen, the leather-bound book heavy in her hands, its worn cover seeming to pulse with the echo of his mother's plea. Find the missing chord. Finish our song. It holds the truth. The command was an impossible weight. Play a dead woman's requiem? Channel the grief of a broken boy trapped inside a monster? Fail, and her own music, her soul's lifeline, would be extinguished. The gilded cage had become a seance chamber. She couldn't stay in the oppressive stillness of the sanctuary. Retreating to her sterile room felt like cowardice, but she needed space, air that wasn't saturated with decades of sorrow. She placed the book on her stark modern desk, the old leather and alien artifact in the chrome and stone environment. The crimson scarf lay where she'd thrown it, a splash of damning color. She ignored it. Sleep remained elusive. Fragments of the sonata's turbulent opening movement, the dissonant chords, the desperate, soaring melodies, chased each other through her mind. The storm inside him. She heard it now, not just as notes on a page, but as a raw, sonic representation of the fury and pain she'd glimpsed in Valentine's eyes. And the plea melody, it echoed the lost hope in the young boy's photograph. The next morning dawned gray and damp, mirroring the pall over the penthouse. Ilara expected summons, punishment, or further impossible demands. None came. Valentine was absent, leaving Nerek's silent, watchful presence as the only indication she wasn't entirely alone. The oppressive silence stretched, filled only by the phantom music in her head. Driven by a desperate need to understand the beast who held her leash, Ilara returned to the forgotten room. She didn't touch the book immediately. Instead, she explored. She gently opened the modest upright piano. The keys were slightly yellowed, but clean. Hesitantly, she pressed middle C. The note rang out, pure and surprisingly resonant, cutting through the dust-laden air. It felt alive. She had played this, his mother. Tracing the faded floral wallpaper, examining the spines of the novels, romantic poets, Gothic tales, Ilara built a picture. A woman of sensitivity, perhaps stifled, finding solace in art and music, pouring her love for her troubled son into the very composition that now haunted Ilara. It holds the truth. What truth? About her death? About Marcus Hart's cruelty? Finally, she couldn't resist. She opened the book to page 47, propping it carefully on the piano's music stand. Sonata for the Storm Inside, for my Valentine. Taking a deep breath, steeling herself against the ghosts, Ilara placed her fingers on the keys of his mother's piano. She started slowly, tentatively. The opening chords were jarring, dissonant clusters that vibrated uncomfortably in her bones, the musical equivalent of a scream. Then came the first frantic arpeggio, like panicked flight. She stumbled, the unfamiliar notation challenging, the raw emotion embedded in the notes unsettling her technique. It felt intrusive, playing this private anguish. She persevered. Gradually, the room seemed to lean in, listening. Dust motes danced in the weak afternoon light, filtering through the uncovered window. As she navigated the chaotic first movement, reaching the first instance of the plea melody, a heartbreakingly simple ascending line in a higher register, a profound sadness washed over her. It was a cry, a child's cry for comfort swallowed by the storm. She was so absorbed, wrestling with the complex emotions woven into the music, that she didn't hear him enter. She only felt the shift in the air, the sudden crushing weight of his presence. She froze, hands suspended over the keys, a dissonant chord hanging unfinished in the air. Valentine stood in the doorway, much as he had the night before, but daylight offered no mercy. He looked exhausted, shadows like bruises under his storm-gray eyes. His usual impeccable control was frayed, his jaw clenched tight. He didn't speak. He just stared at her, then at the open book, then at his mother's piano where her hands rested. "Continue," he commanded, his voice rough, stripped of its silken menace. It was the voice of the boy in the photograph. Forced into the man's body, Ilara's heart hammered. Playing it alone was one thing. Playing it for him, under his burning gaze, felt like performing open-heart surgery without anesthesia. She took a shaky breath and plunged back in, picking up where she left off. This time, the music felt different, charged. His presence amplified every discord, deepened every moment of aching beauty. She poured her own fear, her empathy for the ghost of the boy, her terror of the man watching her, into the keys. When she reached the plea melody again, she played it with a fragile tenderness that surprised even her. A soft sound escaped Valentine. Not a word, a stifled breath, almost a gasp. Ilara glanced up, risking a look. He had turned away, facing the window, his shoulders rigid. But she saw it, the tremor in the hand clenched at his side, a crack in the ice, profound and terrifying. She played on, driven now by a morbid fascination and the desperate need to survive. She navigated the fragmented second movement, sparse, haunting passages, interspersed with moments of frantic, almost violent energy. She reached the end of the written notes on page 48, the music trailing off unresolved, just before the cryptic message. The final, dissonant note hung in the dusty air, vibrating with the ghost of the unfinished song. Ilara lifted her hands from the keys, trembling. The silence that followed was thick, charged with unspoken grief and the echo of the storm. Valentine remained facing the window, his back to her, utterly still. Minutes stretched. Ilara didn't dare move, barely dared to breathe. When he finally turned, his face was a mask again, but the shadows beneath his eyes seemed deeper. The raw vulnerability was gone, buried beneath layers of chilling control. But it had been there. She'd seen it, felt it resonate in the music. "It lacks her touch," he stated flatly. His voice carefully modulated back to its usual cold precision. But the criticism felt hollow, perfunctory. His gaze, however, held hers with a new, unsettling intensity. The plea, you captured its fragility. He paused, his eyes dropping to her hands resting limply in her lap. Your fingers understand sorrow. He stepped closer, not to the piano, but to her. He stopped beside the worn armchair, his hand resting on its back, where his mother's hand might have rested. Practice, he ordered. His gaze still fixed on her hands. Every day, in this room, on this piano, Merrick will ensure you are undisturbed. His eyes lifted, meeting hers. The storm swirling again, darker now. Find the missing chord, Ilara Voss. Unlock the truth she buried in the silence between the notes. He turned and walked out, leaving her alone once more with the ghosts, the unfinished sonata, and the terrifying realization. She wasn't just playing a piece of music. She was playing with dynamite, and Valentine Hart was holding the detonator. The haunting melody had begun to weave its spell, not just on him, but on her. And the search for the missing chord felt less like a puzzle and more like a descent into the heart of a very dangerous darkness. Chapter 8, Music Box Memories. The echo of Valentine's command, find the missing chord, lingered in the forgotten music room long after the door clicked shut behind him. Ilara sat frozen at the modest piano, the ghostly imprint of his mother's unfinished sonata still vibrating in her fingertips and the dusty air. His reaction haunted her more than the music itself. The tremor in his hand, the raw, shattered look before the ice slammed back down. He wasn't just demanding a performance, he was demanding an exorcism, and she was the unwilling conduit. The weight of the leather-bound book felt heavier than ever. It holds the truth. What truth could be buried in an unfinished piece of music? The truth of his mother's despair? The truth of Marcus Hart's cruelty? Or something else entirely, driven by a morbid mix of terror, empathy for the ghost of the boy, and the desperate need to survive? Ilara returned to the book. She meticulously copied the unfinished sonata onto fresh manuscript paper she found in a drawer of the old desk, careful not to damage the brittle originals. The act felt sacred, transgressive. She practiced on his mother's piano, the slightly stiff action and warm, intimate tone, a stark contrast to the cold perfection of the Steinway in the main living area. Playing here, surrounded by the faded echoes of the woman's life, felt different, more real, more dangerous. Days bled into a tense rhythm. Valentine remained largely absent, a brooding presence sensed rather than seen. Merrick delivered meals to her room with silent efficiency, his expression unreadable. The penthouse felt like a pressure cooker, the silence thick with anticipation and the unresolved tension from the music room. During one practice session, frustration mounting over a particularly complex transition in the second movement, Ilara pushed back the piano bench with a sigh. Her gaze fell on the worn armchair, the porcelain teacup. Restlessness drove her to explore the room again, more thoroughly this time. She ran her fingers along the bookshelves, pulling out volumes of poetry, collections of folk songs. Tucked behind a heavy anthology of romantic composers, her fingers brushed against something small, hard, and rectangular. Not a book. She carefully pulled it free. It was a music box, made of dark, polished wood, inlaid with mother-of-pearl in a swirling floral pattern. It was exquisite, delicate, and looked profoundly out of place amidst the faded grandeur and Valentine's sterile world. There was no key. A strange compulsion seized her. She carried the box to the piano and placed it on the closed lid. Gently, she tried to pry it open. It resisted. Remembering the cryptic message, "The key is in the silence between the notes," felt like grasping at straws, but desperation made her reckless. She placed her fingertips lightly on the smooth wood, near the hidden mechanism. Taking a deep breath, she hummed the unresolved, dissonant chord that ended the written portion of the sonata, the very chord that hung suspended before his mother's cryptic message. Nothing happened. Disappointment washed over her. It was absurd. Then, on a whim, she hummed the resolution she instinctively felt should follow, a minor chord tinged with a melancholic sweetness, the kind of resolution that spoke of acceptance rather than triumph. A soft internal click sounded from the music box. Alara gasped. Heart pounding. She lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on faded blue velvet, lay a small tarnished silver key identical to the one that had opened this room. And beside it, resting on the velvet, was a single tightly coiled metal cylinder, the music box mechanism. Hesitantly, she picked up the cylinder. It felt cool and delicate. She slotted it into the designated space within the box, then carefully inserted the small silver key into the winding hole on the side. She turned it. The mechanism resisted, stiff with age, then gave with a soft protesting whine. 7 turns. 8. It wouldn't wind further. She closed the lid and lifted the clasp. The music that spilled out was fragile, achingly beautiful, and utterly heartbreaking. It wasn't a complex melody, but a simple, repeating lullaby motif, a variation of the plea melody from the sonata, stripped bare and rendered with heartbreaking simplicity. As it played, a woman's voice, soft, warm, and thick with unshed tears, spoke faintly beneath the delicate chimes. "My Valentine, my storm, listen, the silence holds the key, not just to the song, to everything. He lies, Marcus lies, about the accident, about me. Find the letters, beneath the floor, where the moonlight touches. Promise me. Finish our song, the final chord will set you free. My love, my brave broken boy." The voice dissolved into a soft sob, swallowed by the final, lingering chime of the music box. Alara stood frozen, tears streaming down her face without her realizing it. The voice, his mother's voice, filled with love, terror, and a devastating accusation. Marcus lies, about the accident, about me. And the plea, finish our song. The final chord will set you free. The implications crashed over her. Valentine's mother hadn't died in a simple accident. Marcus' heart was involved, and the truth, the key to freeing Valentine from whatever chains his father had forged, was somehow tied to completing the sonata. The final chord will set you free. Was it metaphorical, or something more? A floorboard creaked. Alara whirled around, hastily closing the music box lid, but it was too late. Valentine stood in the doorway. He wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the music box on the piano lid, his face bone white, every trace of color drained. His storm-gray eyes were wide, shattered, fixed on the small wooden box as if it were a ghost. Or a grenade. He took a single, unsteady step into the room, then another. He moved like a sleepwalker drawn to the source of unbearable pain. He stopped before the piano, his hand trembling violently as he reached out, not for Alara, but for the music box. His fingers brushed the polished wood, tracing the mother-of-pearl inlay. A choked sound escaped him, raw and wounded. He lifted the box with infinite care, as if handling a dying bird. He didn't open it. He simply held it, cradling it against his chest, his eyes closed, his shoulders hunched as if against a physical blow. When he opened his eyes again, the devastation was still there, but it was rapidly being consumed by a rising, incandescent fury. He slowly turned his gaze to Alara. The look in his eyes wasn't just anger. It was a primal, possessive rage, mixed with a terrifying vulnerability she had just exploited. "Who gave you the right?" His voice was a low, dangerous rasp, stripped bare. "Who gave you the right to touch this, to hear her?" He took a step towards her, the music box still clutched, protectively against him. "To open my wounds?" Alara stumbled back, hitting the edge of the piano. I found it. The chord. I hummed the chord." "You hummed?" The word was a lash. "You pried into the grave with a hum?" He was upon her in 2 strides. He didn't strike her. Instead, his free hand shot out and clamped around her right wrist, the wrist of her playing hand, with crushing force. Pain lanced up her arm. "These hands," he hissed, his breath hot and furious against her face, his eyes burning into hers. "These clever, soulful hands, they belong to me. They do not touch her. They do not unlock her secrets without my command." He squeezed, the pressure threatening bone. Alara cried out, tears of pain joining the tracks of her earlier emotion. "I didn't know. I was trying to understand the sonata. I was trying to find the missing chord." "The missing chord?" Valentine's laugh was harsh, devoid of humor. You found more than a chord, little grave robber. You found dynamite. He released her wrist abruptly. She cradled it, gasping, the skin already bruising. He looked down at the music box in his other hand, his expression a war zone of grief and fury. You will never touch this again, he stated, his voice regaining a sliver of icy control, though it trembled at the edges. You will never enter this room without my explicit presence. You will practice the sonata on the Steinway, and you will finish it. He looked up, his gaze locking onto hers with terrifying intensity. But understand this, Ilara Voss, the truth you heard, the secrets she whispered. They are mine, my burden, my curse. You will find the missing chord. You will finish the sonata. But the truth it unlocks, that belongs to me. And if you breathe a word of it, if you think of using it. His eyes dropped meaningfully to her bruised wrist, then back to her terrified face. I will break more than your fingers. I will silence the song inside you forever. Is that clear? He didn't wait for an answer. He turned, cradling the music box like a sacred relic, stained with poison, and walked out of his mother's sanctuary, leaving Ilara alone with the echo of a dead woman's voice, the throbbing pain in her wrist, and the terrifying realization. She hadn't just found a key to the past. She'd stumbled upon a live wire, connecting Valentine's deepest trauma to his most explosive rage. The music box held a lullaby and a lie, and its secrets were now a deadly part of her captivity. The missing chord wasn't just a musical resolution. It was the detonator. Chapter 9. Cipher in the Silence. The echo of Valentine's fury, the phantom ache in her bruised wrist, and the haunting chime of the music box lingered like poison in the penthouse air. Ilara was banished. The forgotten music room, the sanctuary filled with his mother's ghost, and the devastating secret shed unearthed, was now locked tighter than any biometric seal. Valentine's command echoed. Practice on the Steinway. Find the missing chord. Speak of the truth to no one, especially not to him. The gilded cage felt colder, more constricting. Valentine himself became a ghost haunting the periphery. He moved through the penthouse like a storm contained, silent, brittle, his usual icy control replaced by a simmering tension that vibrated through the stone floors. Meals were left outside her door. Merrick's silent vigilance felt heavier, his impassive gaze holding a new, unreadable weight. Ilara caught glimpses of Valentine sometimes, standing at the panoramic windows, staring out at the city with a hollow intensity, or pacing the living area late at night, a shadow etched in moonlight. He looked, unraveled. The music box had detonated something deep within him, leaving fractures in his armor. The leather-bound book, carefully transported to the sterile grandeur of the main living area, felt alien on the Steinway's polished lid. Playing his mother's anguished sonata here, under the watchful emptiness of the vast room, felt like a desecration. The cold perfection of the instrument couldn't capture the raw, intimate pain embedded in the notes meant for the worn upright piano in the sealed room. Yet she played. Driven by terror, by the memory of his mother's desperate plea in the music box, "Finish our song. The final chord will set you free." And by a dawning, horrifying empathy for the broken boy trapped inside the tyrant, the unresolved ending, the dissonant chord hanging before the cryptic message, taunted her. The key is in the silence between the notes. She played it over and over, letting the discord vibrate in the air, listening for the resonance of an answer that wouldn't come. The silence between the notes felt vast, empty, mocking. Frustration gnawed at her. One afternoon, driven by a desperate need to feel something real, she abandoned the Steinway and retreated to her sterile room. But the sterile silence there was worse. Her gaze fell on the worn duffel bag tucked in the closet, a relic of her old life. On impulse, she pulled out her own small portable music stand, a cheap folding thing she'd used for gigs. As she unfolded its spindly legs, a sliver of paper, brittle with age and tucked into the joint, fluttered to the stone floor. Not her paper. Her breath hitched. She picked it up. It was a fragment of sheet music, handwritten in the same elegant script as the sonata book. Just a few bars, a complex, twisting variation on the plea melody, annotated with tiny cryptic symbols in the margins. A crescent moon, a small arrow pointing down, and the number 7. Beneath it, in faint pencil, almost erased, "Beneath the songbird's perch, where moonlight weeps, songbird's perch, his mother's piano, where moonlight weeps, the uncovered window in the forgotten room, beneath the floorboards." Alara's heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't in the book. This was a hidden clue, a breadcrumb left behind. Find the letters, beneath the floor. Where the moonlight touches, the music box's plea roared back. This fragment was the cipher. The symbols, the moon, the arrow, the number were instructions. She needed to get back into the sealed room. It felt impossible. Valentine's wrath was a tangible barrier, but the fragment burned in her hand. That night, the penthouse racked in the deep silence past midnight. Ilara moved. She crept past her door, listening intently, only the hum of the climate control. Valentine's wing was dark. Merrick's room was silent. The hallway to the forgotten room felt like a mile long. The biometric panel beside the door glowed faintly red. Locked. Heart pounding, Ilara pressed her ear to the cold wood. Silence. Then, remembering the music fragment, she did the only thing she could think of. She pulled the crumpled paper from her pocket and hummed the complex, twisting melody written on it, the variation on the plea, imbuing it with the desperate hope she felt. Nothing happened. Disappointment crashed over her. It was foolish. Then a soft, internal thunk echoed from within the door mechanism. The biometric light flickered and turned green. The melody was the key. His mother had woven a sonic lock into the sonata itself. Ilara pushed the door open, the old hinges groaning softly in protest. The room was bathed in silver moonlight, dust motes dancing like forgotten spirits. She went straight to the modest upright piano, the songbird's perch. Kneeling, she traced the floorboards beneath the piano bench, where the moonlight pooled most directly, where moonlight weeps. Her fingers found a slight irregularity, a board that felt less secure. The number 7, 7 boards from the wall. She counted, her fingers trembling. The 7th board shifted slightly under her probing nails. Using the edge of her own cheap music stand, she pried it up. It lifted with a scrape of protest, revealing a dark cavity beneath. Nestled in the dust and shadows was a small, oilcloth-wrapped bundle. Ilara reached in, her fingers closing around the bundle. It was heavier than it looked. She pulled it out, the dust of decades coating her hands. Sitting back on her heels in the moonlight, she carefully unwrapped the oilcloth. Inside lay a stack of letters, tied with a faded blue ribbon. The top envelope was addressed in that same elegant hand. "For my Valentine, when he is ready." The truth. Marcus lies. His mother's voice preserved on paper. A floorboard creaked behind her, loud as a gunshot in the silent room. Ilara froze, the bundle clutched protectively to her chest. She didn't need to turn. She felt the cold weight of his presence, the simmering fury cutting through the dusty air. The moonlight outlined his tall frame in the doorway, casting his face in deep shadow, but the storm in his eyes was palpable. His voice, when it came, was a low, dangerous rasp, vibrating with barely leashed rage and a profound, wounded betrayal. "Digging graves again, little bird." The letters felt like live coals in her hands. The ghost of his mother watched from the photograph. The cage door had slammed shut, trapping her with the dynamite shed unearthed and the wounded beast who owned it. The silence between them wasn't empty now. It was charged with the weight of a devastating truth, and Valentine Hart looked ready to tear the world apart to claim it, or silence it, forever. Chapter 10. Oilcloth and Oblivion. The oilcloth-wrapped letters felt like a live bomb against Elara's chest. Valentine's voice, "Digging graves again, little bird?" wasn't just a question. It was a glacier cracking, a promise of annihilation wrapped in a whisper. The moonlight streaming through the uncovered window turned the dust motes into 1,000 accusing eyes. Elara didn't turn. She couldn't. The sheer, suffocating weight of his presence pinned her to the floorboards. She heard his slow, deliberate footsteps on the worn rug, each one echoing the frantic hammering of her own heart. The scent of bergamot and winter air was now laced with something feral, metallic, pure distilled rage. He stopped behind her, close enough for the heat radiating from him to sear her skin through her thin shirt, close enough for her to feel the tremor running through him, a volcano barely contained. His shadow fell over her, engulfing the bundle of letters in her hands. Turn around, he commanded, the words gritted out between clenched teeth. Look at me while you hold her ghost. Slowly, trembling violently, Elara turned on her knees. She looked up. Valentine Hart, silhouetted against the moonlit window, was a study in shattered control. His face was pale, stark, etched with lines of fury and a grief so deep it hollowed his cheeks. His storm-gray eyes weren't icy anymore. They were molten lead, burning with an intensity that threatened to incinerate her. His gaze locked onto the oilcloth bundle, as if it were the heart of his enemy ripped from its chest. Give them to me. Each word was a bullet. Elara clutched the bundle tighter, an instinctive, protective gesture that felt absurd even as she did it. Protect his mother's truth from him? They're addressed to you, she whispered, her voice raw with terror. For my Valentine, when he is ready. A muscle spasmed violently in his jaw. Ready? The word was a bitter laugh choked by rage. I was never ready. She left me alone. She left me with him. His voice rose, cracking on the last word, echoing in the small, dusty room. And you. He took a step closer, looming over her. You pry open her grave, you violate her silence, and you dare to hold her last words hostage? They're not hostages, Elara protested, desperation lending her strength. She wanted you to have them. She hid them. She said Marcus lied, about the accident, about her. Silence. The roar ripped from him, primal and terrifying. He lunged, not for the letters, but for her. His hands clamped onto her shoulders, hauling her roughly to her feet. The letters tumbled from her grasp, landing with a soft thud on the rug. He ignored them, his burning eyes fixed solely on her face, his fingers digging into her flesh like talons. You know nothing, he snarled, shaking her slightly. Nothing of her pain. Nothing of my pain. You hear a whisper in a music box, find some dusty papers, and you think you understand the abyss? Spittle flecked his lips. You are a thief, Elara, a grave robber with clever fingers and a morbid curiosity. You steal her voice, her secrets, and you dangle them before me like some trophy. His rage was a physical force, battering her. The pain in her shoulders was intense, but it was the raw, naked agony in his eyes that truly paralyzed her. The boy from the photograph was screaming through the man, lost, betrayed, drowning in a lifetime of suppressed fury. I was trying to help, she gasped, tears blurring her vision. She said the final chord would set you free. She wanted you to know the truth. The truth? Valentine's laugh was harsh, bordering on hysterical. The truth is she's gone. The truth is Marcus took her. The truth is I lived. He shook her again, his control fraying completely. And the truth is, you have no right to her, no right to this. He shoved her backwards. She stumbled, hitting the edge of the upright piano, the old wood groaning in protest. She slid down to sit on the floor, gasping, cradling her bruised shoulders. Valentine stood over her, breathing heavily, his chest heaving. His gaze dropped to the oilcloth bundle lying innocently on the rug between them. The fire in his eyes flickered, momentarily drowned by a wave of profound, soul-crushing weariness. He looked from the letters to Elara, crumpled and terrified against the piano, then back to the letters. The fight seemed to drain out of him, replaced by a chilling emptiness more terrifying than his rage. Slowly, deliberately, he knelt. Not gently, like a man performing a grim, necessary task. He picked up the oilcloth bundle. His hands, usually so steady, trembled visibly as he held it. He didn't unwrap it. He simply held it, staring at it as if it contained his own death warrant. The final chord will set me free, he murmured, his voice a broken echo of his mother's plea. He looked up at Elara, his eyes now ancient, hollow. There is no freedom, little bird, only different cages. His gaze swept the room, the dust, the faded wallpaper, the ghost of his childhood. She escaped hers, into the ground. He looked down at the bundle. This is just the lock clicking shut on mine. He pushed himself to his feet, the movement heavy, devoid of his usual predatory grace. He cradled the bundle against his chest, much like he had the music box. A relic of unbearable pain, he didn't look at Elara again. He turned and walked towards the door, his steps heavy on the rug. He paused at the threshold, his back to her, silhouetted once more against the moonlight. "Practice the sonata," he said, his voice flat, dead. "Find the missing chord. Play it for me when it's done." He didn't turn. "That is your purpose, your only purpose now. Forget you ever saw these. Forget you ever heard her voice. Forget this." He stepped out into the hallway, pulling the door closed behind him. The soft click of the latch sounded like a tomb ceiling. Alara sat huddled against the piano, the silence roaring back, thicker and heavier than before. The ghost of his mother felt closer than ever, her plea hanging unanswered in the dust-laden air. "Finish our song. The final chord will set you free." But Valentine hadn't taken the truth as a key. He'd taken it as a sentence. The letters were gone, locked away with his unraveling soul. The missing chord felt like an impossible task, a requiem for a freedom neither of them believed in anymore. The dynamite was in his hands now, and Alara was trapped in the blast radius, with only the haunting, unfinished melody of a dead woman's love as her guide through the coming storm. The cage walls weren't just gilded, they were lined with the oilcloth shroud of a devastating truth. Chapter 11. The Lullaby Locket. The silence after Valentine left was a physical thing, thick with dust, grief, and the suffocating weight of the truth had carried away wrapped in oilcloth. Alara stayed slumped against the old piano, the worn wood pressing into her back, the phantom ache in her shoulders mirroring the hollowness inside. "Forget," had commanded. Forget his mother's voice pleading from beyond the grave. Forget the letters exposing Marcus' lies. Forget the shattered boy drowning beneath the tyrant's ice. But how could she? The ghost of that lullaby melody from the music box echoed in her mind, intertwined with the unresolved dissonance of a sonata's end. The final chord will set you free, a plea, a promise, a burden Valentine had rejected, choosing the familiar chains of his gilded cage over the terrifying uncertainty of freedom. Her gaze, blurred by unshed tears, fell on the piano bench Shed shoved aside in her frantic search. Moonlight caught the edge of the worn velvet seat cushion, revealing a slight tear near the hinge. Something glinted faintly within the ripped fabric, not dust, metal. Driven by a morbid curiosity that felt like the only spark left in her captivity, Alara crawled forward. Ignoring the protest of her bruised shoulders, she hooked a finger into the tear and pulled. The aged velvet gave way with a soft rip. Nestled within the padding, hidden for decades, was a small, oval-shaped object, a locket. It was delicate, made of tarnished silver, its surface etched with swirling patterns that mirrored the mother-of-pearl inlay on the music box. It felt cool, heavy with secrets in her palm. A tiny, almost invisible clasp held it shut. Her breath hitched. Another piece of the puzzle, another ghost reaching out. Had his mother hidden this too, along with the letters? Along with the cryptic message in the music box. "The key is in the silence between the notes." The phrase resonated anew. The locket felt like a silence made solid. Holding her breath, Alara pressed the tiny clasp. It resisted, stiff with age. She tried again, carefully applying pressure. With a minuscule click, it sprang open. Inside, no photograph. Instead, nestled against faded blue silk, lay a tiny, intricately folded piece of paper, no larger than her thumbnail. And beside it, impossibly small, was a sliver of ivory, unmistakably a piano key fragment. It was smooth, worn, perhaps from a child's anxious touch. Hands trembling, Alara carefully extracted the folded paper. Unfurling it with infinite care under the moonlight, she saw it wasn't a note. It was a minuscule, exquisitely drawn musical staff. On it, only a handful of notes were inscribed. Not part of the sonata. This was different, simpler, purer. A brief, ascending sequence of 4 notes, resolving on a single, sustained tone. Beneath it, in the tiniest, most elegant script, his lullaby, the key to the storm's eye. His lullaby, Valentine's lullaby. The one his mother had mentioned in the diary entry, the little phrase he made up. So sad, so beautiful, like a secret he only tells the keys. Alara stared at the 4 ascending notes and the sustained resolution. It wasn't complex, but it resonated with a profound, simple sadness. She could almost hear it, a child's melody whispered in the dark, a fragile raft on a sea of fear, the key to the storm's eye, the calm within the tempest, the core of Valentine's pain. Driven by an impulse she couldn't name, Alara placed the tiny ivory key fragment on her palm. It felt warm, almost alive. Then, softly, barely a breath, she hummed the 4 ascending notes from the locket, holding the final sustained tone. As the last note faded in the dusty air, a faint, answering chime vibrated from within the old upright piano itself. Not loud, not melodious. A single, resonant note, deep and pure, emanating from the soundboard as if the instrument itself had sighed. Alara froze. The key is in the silence between the notes. Had she just played the silence? Activated something with the lullaby? Before she could process it, a shadow fell across the moonlit floor. Alara snapped the locket shut, clutching it and the ivory sliver tightly in her fist, shoving her hand behind her back. Merrick stood in the doorway. He hadn't made a sound. His impassive face was unreadable in the gloom, but his eyes weren't fixed on her face. They were locked onto the torn piano bench cushion, then flickered to her clenched fist hidden behind her back. He didn't speak, didn't move. He simply stood there, a silent sentinel, his presence radiating a cold, unmistakable warning. He knew. He knew she'd found something else. Something Valentine hadn't taken. The silence stretched, thick and dangerous. Merrick's gaze remained fixed on her hidden hand. Would he report her? Take the locket? Deliver her to Valentine's renewed fury? Finally, after an eternity, Merrick gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Not towards her, towards the hallway. A silent command. Leave, now. He stepped aside, clearing the doorway, his expression still carved from stone, but his eyes holding a flicker of something. Caution? Not loyalty, to Valentine, but perhaps to the ghost in this room. To the woman who had once owned the lullaby locket? Alara scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding a frantic tattoo against her ribs. She didn't look at Merrick. She didn't dare. Clutching the locket and the ivory key fragment like stolen fire in her fist, she slipped past him, out of the haunted sanctuary, and fled down the moonlit hallway towards her sterile room. The tiny locket burned against her palm. She hadn't found the missing chord for the sonata. She'd found the key to the storm itself, Valentine's deepest, most vulnerable secret, whispered in a child's lullaby. And Merrick knew she had it. The cage was no longer just gilded. It was a minefield, and she was holding the detonator to the most volatile charge yet. The storm's eye was watching, and its silence was more terrifying than any roar. Chapter 12. Storm's Eye. The locket burned in Alara's clenched fist, a tiny, ticking bomb, disguised as silver and ivory. Merrick's silent warning echoed in the sterile hallway as she fled to her room. He hadn't seized it. He hadn't dragged her to Valentine. Instead, his nod had been a grim permission. Keep this secret, but tread on knives. For days, the penthouse became a mausoleum of tension. Valentine vanished into his study, the oilcloth bundle of letters his only companion. Meals went untouched outside his door. Merrick's silence deepened, his watchful eyes tracking Alara with new intensity, not as a jailer, but as a sentinel guarding a detonation he couldn't prevent. Alara practiced the sonata on the Steinway, the grand piano's cold perfection, a mockery of the raw anguish embedded in the notes. The unresolved ending, the dissonant cliffhanger before his mother's cryptic message, taunted her. The key is in the silence between the notes. She played it relentlessly, the discord vibrating in the hollow luxury of her cage, listening for an answer that wouldn't come. But now, she held another key. Alone in her room, she opened the locket again. The 4 ascending notes of Valentine's childhood lullaby glimmered on the tiny staff. His lullaby. The key to the storm's eye. The ivory sliver, a piano key, felt warm against her skin. She traced the etched silver, the swirls mirroring the music box inlay. His mother hadn't just hidden letters. She'd hidden him, the core of the boy buried beneath the heart heir's armor. That night, drawn by a compulsion she couldn't name, Alara slipped back into the moonlit living area. The city glittered below, indifferent. She approached the Steinway, not to play the sonata, but to hum. Softly, barely a breath, she breathed the 4 ascending notes into the silence, holding the final sustained tone, the lullaby's fragile resolution. As the last vibration faded, a low, resonant hum answered from the piano's soundboard, a single deep note that wasn't hers. It thrummed through the floor, through her bones, echoing the chime she'd heard in his mother's room. The piano itself was part of the cipher, A floorboard creaked. Valentine stood in the shadows of the hallway, backlit by the dim glow of his study. He wasn't wearing his usual armor of control. His shirt was rumpled, sleeves shoved up, revealing the tense cords of his forearms. His hair was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot and raw, not with rage, but with a hollow exhaustion that looked like grief stripped bare. In his hand, he held a single sheet of paper from the oilcloth bundle. He didn't speak. He just watched her, his gaze dropping to her hands, as if he sensed the locket's weight. "You're haunting her," he rasped, his voice scraped thin. "Just like she haunts me." Alara froze, the lullaby's echo still humming in her veins. "I'm trying to understand the silence," she whispered. A harsh, brittle laugh escaped him. He held up the letter fragment. Moonlight caught the elegant, desperate script. "He made me choose," Valentine read aloud. The words brittle as old glass. "My life or your innocence. I chose your life, my storm. I chose the lie. Forgive me." He crumpled the paper in his fist. She let him break her. For me. The admission hung in the air, shattering the last pretense. Marcus didn't just kill her. He made her complicit, made her choose my survival over her truth. His knuckles whitened. "And you keep digging it up, unearthing the rot." He took a step forward, his movements slow, predatory, yet drained of their usual lethal grace. "Why? Does my pain fascinate you, little bird? Does peeling back the monster's skin amuse you?" "No," the denial tore from her. She clutched the locket tighter. "She left you keys, Valentine, the sonata, the music box, this." She opened her palm slightly, revealing the silver edge of the locket. "She was fighting for you. Even then, she hid your lullaby. She called it the key to the storm's eye, the calm inside you." His gaze locked onto the locket. Recognition flickered, a flash of pure, unguarded shock, quickly smothered by suspicion. "Where did you get that?" "Inside the piano bench, in her room." Elora's voice trembled. "She hid it for you, for when the storm got too loud." Valentine stared at the locket as if it were a ghost. The hard lines of his face softened infinitesimally, the exhaustion deepening into something perilously close to vulnerability. He took another step, closing the distance. The scent of bergamot was buried under the acrid tang of sleepless nights and old paper. "Play it," he commanded, his voice a ragged whisper. "Not the sonata, the lullaby." Elora's breath caught. She moved to the piano bench, her legs unsteady. She sat, the cool ivory keys stark under her trembling fingers. She didn't need the tiny staff. The 4 ascending notes. The sustained resolution, they were etched into her now. She placed her fingers on the keys, closed her eyes, and played. The melody was achingly simple, pure. A child's fragile shield against the dark. It floated into the vast, cold space, a whisper of innocence in a prison built on lies. She played it softly, slowly, pouring every ounce of the empathy she felt for the lost boy into those few, poignant notes. When the final sustained chord faded into silence, the resonance hung in the air, thicker than before. Valentine hadn't moved. He stood beside the piano, his head bowed, his shoulders slumped. A single tear traced a path through the dust and exhaustion on his cheek, catching the moonlight. He didn't wipe it away. He just stood there, exposed, the storm momentarily stilled, the eye of his own hurricane laid bare. "It doesn't calm the storm," he said, his voice raw and broken. "It just makes you see the wreckage clearer." He lifted his head. His eyes, when they met hers, held no rage, no ice. Only a profound, devastating weariness and a question that terrified her more than any threat. "What do you see, Alara? When you look into the storm's eye, what wreckage do you see?" The lullaby had unlocked his core, but the truth it revealed wasn't freedom. It was the shattered landscape of a soul that had never known peace. The Tage wasn't just gilded. It was built on the ruins of a boy's stolen lullaby. And Alara held the key to its deepest, most desolate chamber. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was filled with the echoing aftermath of the storm. And Valentine Hart was waiting for her answer. The detonator was in her hands, and the countdown had begun. Chapter 13. The Shattered Glass. The echo of Valentine's lullaby hung in the air, fragile as spun glass. His question, "What wreckage do you see?" wasn't a demand, but a raw confession flung into the void between them. The tear on his cheek, caught in the moonlight, was a fissure in the glacier, revealing the desolate, uncharted sea beneath. Alara couldn't look away. The Storn's eye wasn't calm. It was the terrifying clarity of utter devastation. She saw the broken boy, forever trapped in the shadow of Marcus' cruelty. She saw the man who built a fortress of ice to contain the wildfire of inherited rage and suffocating guilt. She saw the crushing weight of his mother's sacrifice, a choice that saved his life but damned her, twisting her love into a weapon Marcus used to break them both. I see. Her voice was a whisper, scraping against the silence. I see the boy who played a secret lullaby, the boy who needed his mother's song. She met his shattered gaze. I see the wreckage Marcus' heart made of both of you. Valentine flinched as if struck. The vulnerability vanished, swallowed by a wave of defensive fury that darkened his eyes. Sentiment, he spat, the word laced with self-loathing. A useless indulgence. Marcus knew that. He carved it out of her, out of me. He gestured violently towards the crumpled letter fragments still in his hand. She chose oblivion. She chose his lie. To save you, Alara insisted. The locket burning in her palm. She fought for you with the only weapons she had left, hiding the truth, leaving you keys. This lullaby, it wasn't just comfort. It was a map back to yourself before Marcus poisoned everything. A map to ruins, Valentine snarled, turning away, his shoulders rigid. He paced towards the panoramic windows, staring out at the glittering city as if it were an enemy camp. There is no before Marcus. He is the foundation, the rot in the bedrock. He owns the wreckage. He slammed his fist against the cold glass, the impact a dull thud that vibrated through the floor. And he knows you know. The chilling implications sliced through the tension. Marcus, the unseen architect of their suffering. Valentine's sudden, brittle control wasn't just grief. It was the razor's edge of impending catastrophe. He turned back, his eyes blazing. Hell come, for the letters, for the music box, for you. You've become a loose end wrapped in dynamite. Little bird. Before Alara could respond, a sharp electronic chime echoed through the penthouse. The discreet alarm signaling someone bypassed the lobby security. Direct elevator access. PH only. Valentine went utterly still, his predator's instincts snapping into place. The raw pain vanished, replaced by lethal focus. Merrick, he barked, his voice cutting through the tension. Merrick materialized from the hallway shadows near Alara's room, his expression grim. He held a compact tablet, its screen glowing. Perimeter breach. Elevator override initiated. 5 seconds. Visual confirms Marcus Hart. Armed escort. 4 men. The air turned to Ulse. Marcus, here, now. Valentine's face hardened into a mask of cold fury. Get her to the panic room, he ordered Merrick, his eyes never leaving the elevator doors at the far end of the living area. Now. No, Alara protested, panic surging. The letters, the sonata, the panic room. Now. Valentine's voice brooked no argument. He moved with terrifying speed, crossing to his steady door, yanking it open, and retrieving something heavy and dark from within, a sleek, matte black pistol. The sight of it, cold and efficient in his hand, made Alara's blood run cold. Merrick grabbed her arm, his grip firm but not bruising. Move. He pulled her towards a seemingly blank section of wall near the kitchen. A hidden panel slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a small steel-reinforced chamber. The elevator doors pinged open. Marcus Hart stepped into the penthouse. He was older than Valentine, but cut from the same unforgiving granite. Silver threaded his dark hair, swept back severely. His suit was immaculate, charcoal gray, exuding power and chilling precision. His eyes, the same storm gray as Valentine's, but devoid of any storm. Only a frozen, calculating void swept the room, landing instantly on Valentine, then flicking dismissively to Alara being pulled towards the panic room. 4 large men in dark tactical gear fanned out behind him. Weapons held low but ready. Marcus's voice was smooth, cold, devoid of warmth. Dispensing with pleasantries, I see. How predictable. His gaze slid to Alara. And the songbird, still singing her borrowed tunes, I presume. Get out, Valentine stated, his voice low, vibrating with contained violence. He held the pistol loosely at his side, but his stance was coiled, ready. "You're not welcome here." "Welcome?" Marcus chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "This empire? This penthouse? Note on my work, my decisions. Everything you have, boy, flows from me. Including," his eyes hardened, "the silence you seem so determined to shatter." He took a step forward, his men mirroring him. "Where are they, Valentine? My late wife's fanciful scribblings, the lies she poisoned?" "They're gone," Valentine growled. "Burned." Marcus's smile was thin, dangerous. "You were never a good liar. Not like her." He gestured idly towards Elena, now at the panic room threshold, Merrick shielding her. "She found them, didn't she? The little pianist with the soulful ears. Did she read them? Did she weep over the tragic tale?" His voice dripped with contempt. "Did she weep for you, Valentine, the poor broken boy who killed his mother?" The world stopped. Ilara froze, Merrick's hand tightening on her arm. Valentine went rigid, the color draining from his face. The pistol trembled almost imperceptibly in his hand. "What?" The word was a strangled whisper from Valentine. Marcus feigned surprise. "Oh, she didn't share that part? The crucial detail?" He took another step, his voice dropping to a poisonous murmur. "The accident wasn't just convenient, Valentine. It was orchestrated. But the trigger, the distraction that made her swerve, that was you." He pulled a slim, old-fashioned digital recorder from his pocket. "She left more than letters in her weakness. A voicemail. From me. Found it years later, buried in an old system backup. Shall we hear her final?" Frantic words? Driving home after finding your secret stash of stolen car keys? After you called her sobbing about crashing my vintage Jaguar? He pressed play. A woman's voice, distorted by old recording, filled with terror and static, burst forth. "Marcus, Valentine took the Jag. He's just a boy. He called. He's crying. He's hurt. He's on the old cliff road. I have to." A horrific screech of tires, a scream cut short by a deafening crash. Then silence. Marcus stopped the recording. The silence that followed was absolute, suffocating. "She was rushing to save you, boy," Marcus hissed, venomous triumph in his eyes, distracted, panicked, driving too fast on wet roads, because you stole a car you couldn't handle, because you called her hysterical. You killed her, Valentine, not me. Your weakness, your childish fear. Valentine stood frozen. The pistol hung limply at his side. All the rage, the control, the icy fury. It shattered. His face crumpled. He didn't look at Marcus. He looked through him, into a void of absolute soul-crushing horror. A low, guttural sound escaped him, part denial, part agony. The wreckage Alara saw in the storm's eye wasn't just Marcus' doing. Valentine's own hands were stained. The foundation of his monstrous control wasn't just his father's cruelty. It was built on the bedrock of his own catastrophic childhood guilt. Marcus smiled, a predator savoring the kill. "Now," he said smoothly, nodding to his men. "The letters, the music box, and silence the songbird, permanently." One of the men raised his weapon, not towards Valentine, but towards Alara. Time snapped. Valentine's shattered gaze focused with terrifying speed on the threat to Alara. A raw, animalistic roar tore from his throat. He moved, not towards Marcus, not with the gun. He lunged across the space between him and the piano, his mother's Steinway. In one fluid, desperate motion, he grabbed the heavy, chrome-plated lyre, the ornate frame holding the pedals, and wrenched it free with a scream of tearing metal. He swung it like a scythe, not at the armed man, but at the massive floor-to-ceiling window directly beside the piano. The impact was catastrophic. Tempered glass, designed to withstand storms, exploded outwards in a cascading shower of deadly diamonds. A howling vortex of wind and rain ripped into the penthouse, snatching papers, overturning a side table. The armed man stumbled back, shielding his face from the flying glass. "Alara, go!" Valentine bellowed over the shrieking wind. Standing amidst the maelstrom, the jagged lyre still in his hand, blood welling from cuts on his face and arms from the flying glass. He looked like a fallen angel, framed by the shattered skyline. his eyes burning with a desperate, sacrificial fury directed solely at her. Merrick didn't hesitate. He shoved Alara bodily into the panic room just as Marcus' men opened fire. Bullets sparked off the steel doorframe. Merrick slammed the heavy door shut, the locking mechanism engaging with a final, resonant thunk, sealing Alara in absolute darkness and silence. The sound of gunfire and the city's roar muffled, but the image of Valentine, shattered and bleeding amidst the tempest had unleashed, seared onto her soul. The cage was broken, but the cost was written in blood and shattered glass. The storm wasn't just inside Valentine anymore, it had consumed the world. Chapter 14, Ashes in the Tempest. The panic room door slammed shut, plunging Alara into absolute suffocating darkness. The thick steel muffled the world outside into a terrifying dreamscape. The shriek of the wind through the shattered window, the staccato bark of gunfire, the guttural shouts, and beneath it all, a raw, agonized roar that could only be Valentine. She pressed her ear against the cold metal, her heart a frantic bird battering against her ribs. Thud, thud, thud. Was that gunfire? Or her own pulse? The metallic tang of fear filled her mouth. She fumbled blindly along the wall, finding a small recessed panel. A button. She pressed it. Dim emergency lighting flickered on, revealing a small, sterile space, reinforced walls, a bench, a communications panel blinking red. Security breach. Lockdown active. No outside signal. No way out. Trapped. The muffled sounds intensified. A crash. Furniture? Glass? A guttural cry cut short. Merrick? Then, Valentine's voice, ragged and furious, slicing through the chaos. Look at her, Marcus. Look at what you made. Silence. Heavy. Then Marta's voice, cold and clear even through the barrier. I see weakness. Like your mother. Like you. Always breaking. Another burst of gunfire. Closer. Something heavy thudded against the panic room door. Alara recoiled, stifling a scream. Was it a body? Had they breached? She pressed her hands flat against the steel, willing Valentine to be alive, willing Marcus to be dead. Then Valentine's voice again, closer, strained with pain but vibrating with a terrible broken power. You twisted it. That recording. You made her panic. You knew she'd come. You knew I'd call her. Did I? Marcus' tone was almost bored. Does it matter, boy? The result is the same. Her blood is on your hands. Your weakness killed her. Just like your weakness will kill you now. And your little canary. A deafening bang shook the door. Not gunfire, but something massive impacting it. Valentine roaring. A sickening crunch of bone. A choked gasp. Marcus? Then, silence. Profound, terrifying silence. Only the wind howling through the shattered penthouse, carrying rain and the distant wail of sirens growing closer. The red light on the comm panel blinked. Lockdown override. Heart V. Biometric confirmed. The heavy locking mechanisms groaned and disengaged with a series of metallic clunks. The door hissed open. Alara stumbled out, blinking against the sudden chaotic light. The panoramic window was a gaping maw to the stormy night. Rain lashed in, soaking the ruined luxury, overturned furniture, scattered papers, glittering shards of glass, everywhere like deadly confetti. The acrid smell of gunpowder and blood hung thick in the air. Valentine stood near the shattered edge, silhouetted against the city lights and the storm. He was a ruin. Blood streamed from a gash on his temple, mingling with rain on his face. His knuckles were raw and bleeding. His shirt was torn, dark stains spreading across his shoulder and side. He held his injured arm close to his body, his breath coming in ragged, wet gasps. He wasn't holding the gun. He was holding something else. Marcus' heart lay crumpled at his feet, not dead, but broken. His immaculate suit was torn and bloodied, one arm bent at a grotesque angle. His face was a mask of pain and utter disbelief, his cold gray eyes wide with shock. Valentine's boot rested heavily on his chest, pinning him to the rain-slicked stone floor. In Valentine's bleeding hand, clutched like a talisman, was the small, tarnished silver locket. He stared down at his father, his expression not triumphant, but hollow, devastated, as if looking at his own future, his own inevitable decay. Merrick lay nearby, slumped against the overturned sofa, clutching his side. Blood seeped through his fingers, his face pale, but his eyes were oaken, watchful. One as Marcus' men lay motionless near the elevator. The others were gone, fled, or incapacitated. Valentine didn't seem to register Alara's presence. His gaze was locked on Marcus. His voice, when it came, was a raw scrape against the wind and rain, devoid of its usual power, filled only with ashes. "You stole her," Valentine whispered, the words barely audible over the storm. "You stole her voice, her music, her life. You twisted her love into a knife and shoved it into my heart. You made me believe," his voice broke. "You made me believe I killed her." Marcus spat blood, a weak, defiant sound. "Truth hurts, boy." Valentine's boot pressed down harder. Marcus gasped, choking. "The only truth," Valentine rasped, "is that you are poison, and poison needs to be cut out." He lifted his head, his storm-gray eyes finally finding Alara. The look in them shattered her, a maelstrom of pain, guilt, and a terrifying, exhausted resolve. "Get Merrick to the service elevator," he ordered, his voice gaining a sliver of steel. "Down to the garage. Cars waiting. Go." "What about you?" Alara cried, stepping forward, glass crunching under her feet. Rain plastered her hair to her face. Valentine looked back down at Marcus. "I finish this." He raised the hand holding the locket, not as a weapon, but as a symbol. Her song ends now. His reign ends now. He reached into his pocket with his free hand, pulling out a small, sleek device. A detonator? A security fob? "Valentine, no." Alara pleaded. "Has not worth it. Has broken. Let him rot in prison." Marcus wheezed a bloody laugh. "He doesn't have the spine for prison. Or for finishing the job. Weak, like his mother." Valentine's expression didn't change. Beyond rage, beyond hatred. It was a terrible, final stillness. He pressed a button on the device. Not an explosion. A low, powerful hum vibrated through the floor. From hidden panels in the ceiling, thick, fire-retardant foam began to spray down in a torrential, suffocating cascade, mixing with the rain, coating everything, the ruins, the blood, Marcus, Valentine, in thick, white clinging oblivion. "Go." Valentine roared over the sudden hissing deluge, his eyes burning into Alara's through the thickening veil of foam. "Now." Merrick groaned, trying to push himself up. Alara didn't hesitate. She lunged forward, grabbing Merrick's uninjured arm, hauling him up with strength she didn't know she had. "Come on," she yelled over the hissing foam. She half-dragged, half-carried the wounded man towards the service hallway, away from the white chaos engulfing the living area, away from Valentine standing like a vengeful wraith in the storm of his own making, foam coating his bleeding form, the locket still gleaming faintly in his fist as he stood over the man who had destroyed his world. The sonata wasn't finished. The final chord remained unsounded. That Valentine Hart had chosen his own dissonant resolution, a white, suffocating silence. The cage wasn't just broken, it was being erased. Buried in synthetic snow and the ashes of a dying empire, the storm raged on, but within its eye, only oblivion remained. Chapter 15, The Final Chord. The sterile white of the hospital corridor felt like a cruel mockery of the foam-drenched oblivion Alara had fled. Days blurred into a nightmare of hushed voices, disinfectant, and the relentless beeping of monitors. Merrick, stabilized but grievously wounded, occupied a room down the hall, guarded by men whose loyalty had shifted irrevocably from Marcus' empire to the shattered heir fighting for his life. Valentine's room was a cocoon of technology and tense silence. Tubes snaked from his arms, machines breathing for him, monitoring the fragile spark beneath the bandages swathing his head, chest, and arms. The doctor spoke in low, cautious tones. Multiple gunshot wounds, severe blood loss, a skull fracture from debris, lungs bruised from the force of the explosion that had not been a detonator, but a high-pressure foam system designed to incapacitate and obscure. Head shielded Merrick, taken the brunt of Marcus' final desperate shots before triggering the deluge. Marcus' Hart was gone, vanished in the chaos, his empire collapsing like rotten timber, hunted by his own sins and the authorities Merrick had discreetly alerted. But Valentine lingered in the gray place between life and death. A coma. Not the oblivion had unleashed in the penthouse, but a profound, terrifying stillness. Alara sat by his bedside, the crimson scarf, retrieved from the ruins of the penthouse, miraculously unstained, folded neatly on her lap. The frantic terror had subsided, replaced by a deep, aching exhaustion, and a resolve forged in the crucible of the storm. The gilded cage was dust. The monster who owned her was broken on a hospital bed, and she was free. Truly free. Merrick had papers drawn up, funds transferred, a fortune, enough to vanish, to rebuild a life far from the Hearts and their poisoned legacy. Yet, she stayed. She stayed through the hushed nights, listening to the rhythmic sigh of the ventilator. She stayed as the city buzzed with the scandal of Marcus Hart's downfall. She stayed holding the small, tarnished silver locket she'd kept hidden, the key to the storm's eye, now a cold weight against her palm. One rain-lashed afternoon, the gray light filtering through the blinds, Alara couldn't bear the silence anymore. Not the machine silence, but the profound silence within Valentine. The silence where the storm had raged, where the guilt had festered, where the music had died. She stood, walked to the corner of the private room where Merrick, defying his own doctor's orders, had arranged for something to be brought. A small portable electronic keyboard, not a Steinway, not his mother's upright, but it had keys. It could make sound. She unfolded it on the bedside table, facing Valentine. His face was pale, peaceful in a way it had never been in wakefulness, yet utterly devoid of the fierce, wounded life she'd come to know. She plugged in the small speakers, set the volume low. She didn't open the leather-bound book. She didn't need to. The sonata, his mother's anguished plea, the storm inside him, the dissonant cliffhanger, was etched into her soul. But she didn't start with the sonata. Her fingers, trembling only slightly, found the keys. Softly, barely louder than the rain against the window, she played the 4 ascending notes. She held the final, sustained tone of Valentine's childhood lullaby, the key to the storm's eye. The simple, pure melody hung in the sterile air, a fragile raft on. The sea of machines in silence, she let the last note fade. Then, without pause, she began the sonata. She poured everything into it, not just the notes, but the alley's terror, the suffocation of the cage, the shock of the music box, the dust of the forgotten room, the devastating weight of the letters, the lullaby's fragile hope, the shattering glass, the roar of the wind, the taste of blood and foam, the crushing silence of the hospital vigil. She poured her own wreckage, her own fear, her own dawning, terrifying empathy for the broken man before her. She played the turbulent first movement, the storm raging. She played the fragmented second movement, the searching, the despair. She reached the end of his mother's written notes, the dissonant chord hanging unresolved, the silent screaming. Find the missing chord. Alara closed her eyes. She wasn't just playing notes anymore. She was listening. Listening to the silence between the beats of the heart monitor, listening to the rain, listening to the ghost of a woman's love and a boy's stolen song, listening to the wreckage within her own heart, mirrored in the broken man before her. The missing chord wasn't about musical theory. It wasn't about resolving Marcus' lies. It was about resolving the storm. Not silencing it, but finding the eye within it, the place where the lullaby met the requiem, where guilt met grief, met a terrible, fragile kind of love that defied cages and dynasties. Her fingers moved, guided not by intellect, but by the raw shared current of pain and survival flowing between her and the still figure on the bed. She didn't play a triumphant major chord, nor a crushing minor. She played a complex, layered harmony, a chord that held the dissonance of the past, the aching beauty of the lullaby, and a single, clear note of acceptance that rang pure and true through the complexity. It wasn't an ending. It was an acknowledgement, a bridge, a single resonant note of shared humanity forged in the darkest tempest. The final chord hung in the air, vibrating in the small speakers, mingling with the rain and the sigh of the ventilator. Silence returned, but it was a different silence, charged, waiting. Alara opened her eyes, her own vision blurred with tears she hadn't felt fall. She looked at Valentine. His hand, resting on the white sheet, twitched, a minute, almost imperceptible flex of his fingers. Then, slowly, with agonizing effort, his index finger lifted. Just a fraction, just enough. It tapped the sheet. Once, twice. A weak, rhythmic pulse. Tap, tap. Not the frantic beat of a terrified heart, the deliberate, fragile beat of a survivor. The first note of a new song, tentative and raw. A sob caught in Alara's throat. Not of sorrow, of profound, overwhelming relief. He was in there. The storm hadn't drowned him. The wreckage wasn't the end. She reached out, her fingers hovering over his bandaged hand, not touching, but sharing the space above that fragile pulse. Valentine? She whispered, her voice thick. His eyelids fluttered, not opening, not yet. But beneath the bruised lids, there was a faint movement, awareness, returning. Alara didn't move. She sat by the ruins of the monster, the air, the broken boy. She sat by the man who had shattered his own cage to save her, who carried oceans of guilt and pain, who had asked her what wreckage she saw. She saw him, all of him, the darkness and the fragile fighting light. The silence stretched, filled now with the rain, the machines, the echo of the final chord, and the quiet, resilient tap, tap, tap of his finger on the sheet. Slowly, Alara lifted her hand from the keyboard. She placed it gently, palm down, on the bedside table, beside the portable keys. An offering, an invitation. Not a command, a choice. She leaned closer, her voice a soft murmur in the charged stillness. Carrying the weight of their shared tempest and the fragile peace of the storm's eye. Play for me, Valentine. But this time, play for us. The final silence wasn't empty. It held the resonance of the chord, the rhythm of the rain, the promise of his pulse, and the unspoken beginning of a duet composed in ashes, tempered in glass, and finally heard in the quiet after the storm. The cage was gone, the music remained, and the song at last was theirs to finish, together.
Written by Maria. Thank you all for taking the time to dive into this story with me. Your love and support mean everything, and I truly appreciate each and every one of you. This journey wouldn't be the same without you, and I'm so grateful to share these stories with such amazing readers. Stay tuned for more passion, more love, and more unforgettable moments. Until next time, see you in the next one. With love, always, Maria.